It is Art, and welcome to Srs Thurs. And today we're going to talk about a few things. Actually, this is going to be a bit long. But first we're going to talk about what you see before you. Diablo 2, the Median XL mod. This thing's fantastic. It's hard as hell. It's almost as hard as... In fact, I'd say it's harder than the first Diablo, which I love just for its difficulty. It's lots of cool new additions, completely changed mechanics, and gold is actually worth something. And it's hard as fuck. You will see me fighting the essentially first boss of the game in the first area of the game, and you can see just how tricky that is, even with a fairly strong character, at least strong for that point in the game. And before you ask, for those who are in the know, no, I did not use players/8, or whatever it was again. It was set to just one player, and therefore that is the base level difficulty you are seeing right now. It is not an easy game, and I love it, and you should too. If you have Diablo 2, I suggest you get it, and it will be linked in the description. That is the mod, not the game Diablo 2. You have to buy that yourself. I don't support piracy here, sorry. So, why is this video going to be long? What is the main topic? Nintendo. 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 Oh, how I wish I could love Nintendo a little bit more fully. But no, I can't. Because they're kind of awful. And here's why. Let me substantiate that claim. Not gonna say their games are necessarily bad. I love a lot of their games, and I own a 2DS just to play some of them. That's not it. A lot of their games are pretty much top of the line, and they're pretty much system sellers. That's how they work. But let's talk about how else they work, which is very important. Their history. Let's talk about the NES. Let's start there. Now, in case you don't know a whole lot about the that point in time, there was a lot of quality assurance issues with video games, thus the crash that occurred. And the way Nintendo handled this was by saying, oh, well, we have to give people these chips, and we only give them these chips that let you play the game on the system if we think it's good enough, the Nintendo seal of approval. Which sounds sort of reasonable. In fact, it kind of is. Except the problem is, they gave third-party companies fucking nothing. They gave them none of these chips. They gave them comparatively none, anyway. So they never could sell more than the first-party Nintendo titles, which had many, many more copies produced and available. This is probably why there's like 10 Mega Mans, because they had to make their money somehow, so they just went and took the same engine, and made another game, and made another game, and made another game. That's not a fact, that's just my assumption. But, yeah, people were not happy with Nintendo, and by people I mean third-party companies, because that was bullshit, and it still is bullshit. And ever since then, Nintendo's only kind of dug their hole deeper with third-party companies, which is kind of ridiculous. They should easily be able to pull off better third-party support than they have done, but they've just spat in every third party's face over and over again over the course of years. Now, Nintendo did pay for this transgression. Indeed, the Sega Genesis came along late into the NES's life and did really well because third-party devs wanted to make games for it. Why? Because Sega wasn't locking them down like Nintendo was. They could make as many games as they wanted and sell as many copies as they wanted. Nice, huh? You know, so you can make money. And you might think, well, how's Sega supposed to make money? Because people want to buy their console because it has all these games, therefore they make money. No shit. That's why you need third-party devs. You need to fill in the blanks that the first party cannot. I mean, imagine if literally only Nintendo titles ever appeared on any system. Think about how few games there would be. I mean, there'd be great games, no kidding, but... I'm just going to do this real quick. Imagine not even rare games were posted on Nintendo systems, for example. Beyond the NES, you'd have your Ice Climbers, your Super Mario, but then you wouldn't have your Castlevania, your Contra, you wouldn't have your Mega Man, you wouldn't have your Battletoads, you wouldn't have... Oh man, there's a lot of games we're losing out here, aren't we? And how you lose those games is if you piss out the people who make the games. And how do you do that? Well, maybe doing the bullshit with the NES chips. So, when the Super Nintendo landed, they had to kind of make some minor concessions and actually let third-party devs make fucking games and actually make enough of them to sell to make more money. But things were not all well, even though Nintendo made a few turnarounds. No, it got worse. Nintendo was like, well, man, look at all this CD shit going on. We need to make something like that. So they went to Sony, who made the sound chip for the Super Nintendo, like, hey, Sony, you did a good job with the sound chip. Thanks, that was good. Do you guys want to make something called the PlayStation with the CD attachment for the Super Nintendo? Would you like to do that? Oh, yes we would. Let's go ahead and start doing that. Okay. we'll start working on it. Okay, let's write up these contracts. Good. Hey, Nintendo. This is Sony. Why are you making literally all the money off of this deal? Why are we making zero money off of this deal? And why do you get pretty much all rights to anything it has to do ever? Why are we essentially slaves in this situation, making no money? And Nintendo said, go away. And they went to Philip, and Philip had the CDI games that were Nintendo licensed and terrible, and Nintendo probably regretted that quite strongly. And of course they really regretted it when Sony decided to continue with the PlayStation and make a console that beat out Nintendo more than once, and still is heavily beating out Nintendo. It's kind of hilarious because Nintendo's doing relatively okay. At least they're doing better as a company than Sony as a whole, because Sony's kind of going down the shitter, unfortunately for them. But out of everything Sony has, the PlayStation 4 is doing fucking amazing, and the Wii U is not. Even though the rest of Sony is completely fucking dying, and like it's just on fire in a death spiral, about to blow up in a nuclear explosion. But the PS4 still reigns. Isn't that hilarious? And by the way, I don't really care about the PS4. I'm a bit of a PC gamer, so I don't own these consoles. But it's hilarious to me that even though when Sony is at its swan song stage, it's still doing better than Nintendo with this system that it made based on the fact that Nintendo almost commissioned them to make a system for their system. Wow. Funny how that works out. But what happened next? I mean, I just skipped ahead in history a bit, but what else happened? Let's go back a few steps. What happened with the PlayStation? What happened with the Nintendo 64, in fact? That was the next console for Nintendo. What's up with that? Now, in my book, there's a very important thing that happened at this point that Nintendo fucked up on. And I know a lot of people will probably disagree with me, not entirely. Like, they'll agree on a sort of personal level, but they'll be like, well, that doesn't make a huge business difference. It's not like they did something illegal or immoral. It was just a silly mistake to do. The thing is, they're still making this mistake to this year, to this day, the name of the system. Now, what was it initially called? The Ultra 64! Oh, man, that name was cool. Nintendo Entertainment System? Super Nintendo Entertainment System? Ultra 64! Or, you know, Ultra Nintendo 64 Entertainment System or something. It would have been a cool name. And they just called it Nintendo 64. Okay. It's not the worst name they came up with, you know. But it wasn't as cool as Ultra fucking 64. So why did they do that? I don't know. I can't answer your question, but I can tell you something else. Another mistake they made that everyone can really agree on, the cartridge. They were still using cartridges. Now, they load nice and quick, but they can't hold shit. And they are expensive to make. A lot of N64 games were like 70 goddamn bucks, and I believe Legend of Zelda started off at, what, 180, something like that? Way more expensive than anything else on the market. And that's not good. That's not good for selling games on a console if they're that fucking expensive. It's just not good. And furthermore, they just continued to try and make shit for it that didn't work either, such as the DD system. I believe it was called the Dual Disc, or I don't even remember what DD stands for, but it was more or less Japan only, and there was a thing that the N64 would stack on top of, and it would spit out CDs and let you put them in and let you play games with the CDs. And they made a few games for this in Japan, and then they didn't release it in America, even though they had all the attachments on the N64 for it all along. But it did really badly, even in Japan, so they didn't bother releasing it here, which means they wasted time and money on this fucking thing. Not a good decision. And a little bit before that N64, we actually had a really bad decision, like terribly bad decision. Like, this is the kind of shit people are getting onto Ubisoft, onto Microsoft, onto anything with soft in the name somewhere, or if your name is EA, I'm talking about you. Wherein people will put out shit that is not done. And, you know, that hasn't really happened with too much hardware, I would say, console-wise. I wouldn't say that the PS4, Xbox One, or Wii U were necessarily incomplete as systems when they came out. They were developed. I mean, some were better than others, but they were developed alright. They're complete products. That's the problem with the Virtual Boy. Yes, I'm saying Virtual Boy. I'm going to talk about it. It was a prototype, really. It was rushed to market because it was like, well, we're making an N64, so you can make your little Virtual Boy, but you have to put it out in like 2 seconds. But I don't even have it. No, that's fine. Just put that into that. But that's a prototype. I don't want it to be red. No, you gotta sell it, man. Here you go. Watch. This is how you do business. We're Nintendo. We can do anything. Except they couldn't, and they had to cancel the Virtual Boy within 6 months because it was terrible and incomplete and not actually a fucking done console. Dumb. 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 Stupid. Dumb. Also dumb. It gets worse. More happens. Nintendo's history is sordid and fucked. Let's keep talking. And now we get to the GameCube. And, the GameCube. I actually like the GameCube to this day. The controller on it's fantastic. It's one of the best controllers out there still. It would need just a couple modifications to be completely cool as a modern controller. Pretty much like sticks pressing in, slightly better C-stick, and bumpers in addition to the triggers. And that controller is just so good still, though, even without all that. And the system was pretty powerful. As far as I remember, it was technically rivaling the Xbox at the time. Or at least it was damn close, and you could get some really good-looking games on that system. There's some fantastic titles for the GameCube, and all of them looked great. And the problem about that is that it's man, I don't... they still didn't want to do CDs right, let's just put it that way. By this point, DVD was a thing. PlayStation 2 used DVDs. Xbox used DVDs. So you'd think, well, the N64, it did okay, but it got wiped out by the PS1 by a factor of, I think, 10 times, if I remember right. It was ridiculous. And you'd think, well, let's just do the normal thing and put fucking CDs or DVDs or something in the system. And they got close to that. They got slightly close to that. They put a small thing in there, so to speak. They put a small CD in. The DVDs were not normal sized. The DVDs were these little weird tiny things. I mean, I keep rambling trying to make a joke here, but you can't make a joke about this. Nintendo chose to use DVDs that were smaller and could hold less. It was a DRM form, basically, and it was a bad decision. The system also looked kind of silly. Another bad decision. Its base color scheme was purple, which I like purple. Not a lot of people do, as far as I know, at least not back then. If they waited, or if they had released the GameCube in, say, 1992 and made it neon pink, it would have been great. But that's not the case. They released it in the early 2000s, and it was purple, and no one wanted that. And you go to school and you're like, I have a GameCube. I'm like, why the fuck do you have that purple goddamn thing? I have an Xbox. Hear me roar. And that's how the playground went, as they scooped your brains out with a spoon and ate it. And wait, I might be talking about a horror story. Where was I? Oh yes, Nintendo, GameCube, that. So they made the disc smaller as a DRM form, which is silly, because I know you can still break that DRM. Not that I've personally done it, but I know it's doable, and you can hold less on the discs. So people were once again having to develop around the constraint of less space on the disc, or having to ship more discs, which is annoying. No one wants to do that. So a lot of third-party devs just didn't give a fucking shit and didn't put shit on the thing, even though it was a perfectly powerful enough system to do it. Which is interesting because it informed Nintendo's following decision, but their next decision was debatably bad. And I would say it's definitely bad, but one might debate with me, and I could almost agree that there's a chance you could debate with me on this aspect, but we're about to get there. I'm going to say why it's inexcusable what they end up doing next. Harping on with the name situation, Nintendo had a new system coming along called the Revolution. And people were hyped as fuck for it. I certainly was. It was mysterious. No one knew exactly what it would be. How powerful could it be? The 360 had been out for a year. Let's see. Will they make something better than the 360? What will it do? Oh, they're going to do something different out of the controllers. Will it have virtual reality? Have they perfected it? Is it going to be the next fucking Messiah? Is it the next big Nintendo console? Is it indeed the Nintendo Revolution? No. And here's why. Well, first of all, they changed the name to Wii. Did anyone really like that name? Does anyone still actually like that name? Like, you heard the name Wii and you just fell the fucking love. Did that happen to you? I would love to meet the person that happened to. And I would love to study their life and see how the fuck they got to be like that, because that's a very interesting, disturbed individual indeed. The name Wii was not great. And still isn't. Although it's not their worst name ever, it's not great. But they still sold the system. They still sold a bunch of it. Even though it was inferior, and it had gimmicky, weird controls that no one liked, generally. Outside of a few decent first-party applications, such as Wii Sports and the such. But that's the thing, Wii Sports. most people that bought the system were not really gamers. And I know you might say, well, good, you're going to grow the market. You're going to have more people who play games now and therefore have a bigger market. And then you say, wow, that's smart. No. Because they also then did not appeal to their original customers whatsoever. So all they had was the finicky, not actually gamer market buying these things to play Wii Sports a few times and then just not worry about the system after that. Which is not a sustainable market. As we found out later on when the iPhone came along and then put out loads of things such as, I don't know, apps that you can get for very cheap and play. Well, in fact, you can even get a bunch of games free. Oh wow, on your phone. Just free games, just little casual games. And the same people who were like, yeah, I want to just play some shit I don't have to worry about, like Wii Sports, just want to fucking swing a thing. Now they can just tap their phone and do their games, and I can play me some Angry Birds. You know what? I like me some Angry Birds sometimes. No, I don't. But, they're okay. Mobile games, they're fun. At times, there's some good ones. But that pretty much took away everything Nintendo was working towards. That casual market moved on. There was a cheaper, better alternative. The phone they already fucking had, but they already wanted, can also play all these games for either cheap or free. And they were plenty fun, and they required very little thought. And they still don't require very much they still don't require very much thought. And they still are generally pretty fun, other than the whole gouging free-to-play market situation. But that's a completely different story. And not regarding Nintendo, we're not going to worry about that right now because we're talking about Nintendo. Oh, Nintendo. So, the Wii sold well, but killed what sustainable market Nintendo had quite thoroughly. So what could they do next? Well, obviously they want third parties to come back, and that's actually kind of what they tried to do at first with the next system, which we are about to talk about as we get into the current generation with the worst name yet. Or at least, worst name yet in this story. There's a worse name after that. Spoiler alert. And now we're approaching the next big, terrible decision from Nintendo. The next system. I know... Well, you know what? No, I don't know if everyone knows about it, because apparently they don't advertise it. Have you ever heard of it? Nintendo's newest console? Yeah, they have another one other than the Wii. Guess what it's called? Wii U. Wii space capital U. That's the name. I'm gonna fucking cry. Oh, it's such a bad fucking name. Okay. That name's no good. That name's no good. They didn't make commercials for it. That name's no fucking good. They didn't make fucking commercials for it. They still aren't making commercials for the Wii U, really. I don't think I've ever seen one. They still aren't advertising the system. They gave it a terrible name. It's not that powerful compared to the PS4 and Xbox One, which are already fucking weak systems to begin with. It has another gimmick, which is okay in the form of the tablet. But once again, developers don't want to fuck with no gimmicks, and therefore are not quite making much for that system. Which they aren't advertising. Nintendo is not fucking advertising the system. How are you supposed to sell it if people don't know it exists? You don't. They still aren't, because they are in last place in this console war. Oops. Even the Xbox One, which was reviled initially, and it still kind of is reviled, and I still don't trust it. Even though Microsoft's made a lot of good decisions, as I said in the last video. In fact, they made a lot of great decisions. They've passed the 10 million mark, which I don't think the Wii U still has done. It has not hit 10 million. It has not hit 10 million goddamn units yet, and both the other consoles have. Wow. And it had a full year more time to work with. Double wow. The Xbox 360 is selling decently after the Wii U came out, but this is not. It wasn't, and it still isn't. And will it ever? That's a good question. It's not necessarily the worst console ever, but they give it the worst name ever and did make it very powerful and aren't advertising it. I don't really understand any of these business decisions. Also, most of the games that people wanted, they didn't have for a long time, and they said, wow, HD development's hard, guys. HD development is hard, guys. Man, that's practically what they said. If you want, I could go ahead and look up exactly what the quote is, but I'm not going to, because I don't need to. They basically said it was difficult to make, more difficult than they expected to make an HD game, which is something that everyone else on the market has been doing for how fucking long now. Even some indies make goddamn HD games. There's plenty of amazing looking indie games that are very technically, fucking impressive. So why can't Nintendo, a fairly rich and powerful company, do that in a reasonable time frame? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Now, that's not to say Wii U's entirely terrible, because there's a lot of cool stuff on it, like Bayonetta 2, which looks fantastic and runs at a full 60 frames per second, and last I checked, it's 1080p, which is very impressive. You know, stuff like that's why I wouldn't mind having a Wii. You know, Smash Brothers Wii U, fantastic game. Lots of great games for the system, more or less, but it's just so many bad business decisions. The name, the lack of advertisement, the fact it's so much weaker, and doesn't, you know, have a very good competitive price either, for that matter, compared to the other consoles, I don't think. And, of course, another fucking gimmick, because, you know, gimmicks. Fantastic gimmicks. It's Nintendo's trait these days, is just gimmicks and gimmicks. And why? Just why? Oh, it gets worse, so let's get to that last bit of the story. Or at least before we get to present day, where I'm going to talk about the latest big bad decision Nintendo made. Let's talk about the last, most recent, previous to the very most recent bad decision on Nintendo's part. And here it comes. Now I'm going to actually pause talking about Nintendo for a moment, because I have to talk about another company for a moment. I have to talk about Sega. Now let's go a little bit further back in history. Back to, well, the Super Nintendo era. The Sega Genesis was doing pretty good, but the Super Nintendo was so much superior to it that they had to do something, they thought. So they made add-ons for the Genesis. They made the Sega CD, and then later on they made the Sega 32X, and they sold them for too much money. They made almost no games for them, and they weren't that great, and no one wanted them. No one really wanted them, so they didn't sell at all. And they made people look at Sega funny, like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? This is a waste. This is a complete waste. So they're like, okay, Sega Saturn, which was a nice system, but too expensive and too hard to develop for, so it didn't go. As nice as it was just too expensive, too hard to program for, etc., etc. And so then they pushed out the Dreamcast. Oh my god, please buy something. Nope, it was a good system once again. Dreamcast was good, but no. PS2 came out, people had already started trusting PlayStation, and Sega bit it, and pulled the Dreamcast, and kind of just receded into the third-party zone, as they would say. Now that I've gone over that little bit of history, let's go ahead and talk about Nintendo again. So, they put out a system called the 3DS. Cool. But then 3 years later, they put out, oh, here we are. There's the name of the system. I regret saying this, here it comes. The new 3DS. The new 3DS. Before I even cover the technical aspects of it, this name is so bad. It's not good. This is going to confuse anyone. I'm going to become a GameStop employee briefly, minus the part where they try to force you to buy subscriptions of who gives a shit. Hi, I am a GameStop employee. What would you like to buy today? Hi, I am Miss Whoever I am. Little Timmy said they wanted a 3DS. Oh, what kind? A new one. What do you mean by a new one? Do you mean a new 3DS or the new 3DS? And the woman looks at him like he's fucking retarded and leaves. And then files a complaint with corporate saying that the employees are smartasses to people who don't know anything about video games. But in fact, he was trying to seriously tell her what you could buy. Let's go down a list here real quick. Let's say I go into a GameStop and once the 3DS, the new 3DS, god damn it, is launched, and I'm like, okay, I want a DS. Well, what do you mean by you want a DS? Do you want a DS original? Which I don't know if they sell that anymore, but let's just assume they do. Do you want a used DS? Do you want a used DS Lite? Or I don't think they sell those new at all. Do you want a used DSi, DSi XL? Do you want a 3DS, a new one, or a used 3DS? Or do you want a 3DS XL? Or do you want a used 3DS XL? Or do you want a 2DS? Or do you want a used 2DS? Or do you want the new 3DS? Or do you want a used the new 3DS? /XL. Oh, I'm sorry, wait, they're only putting the XL in America, so everyone that wants the regular size is not getting it. Let's get to the technical problems, now that I've made the name problem incredibly clear. The system's being shipped in America as only the big version, not the small version, so that's stupid. And then they aren't giving it an AC adapter. They are not including a means to actually power the system with the system. Oh, I have such a fucking headache. I've had to do this like 8 times. This is my 8th take of this particular part, It pisses me off every time I go over this because this is so stupid. Okay, I'm gonna try this again. Alright, so 3DS. 3DS, new 3DS, bad name. Bad name, and they aren't shipping it with the ability to power it, so they expect you to go and buy another power cable. But of course, not everyone would think to do that unless they were already in the know. So a parent might buy this thing for a kid, and they wouldn't be able to play it on Christmas fucking Day because it has no cable to charge it with. Ooh, man. You know, I don't think I've even bought a fucking bare bones desktop case without a power supply, and it came with a fucking cable for power still. I'm pretty sure that happens most of the time. If not, whatever, because it's a box. It's a box that can't do anything by itself. That makes sense. But they still sometimes put cables with these things. This is a full system. This is a full system that does more than the old system does, but it's included. They include less shit with it. Why? And I'm not saying like extra shit like, oh man, they didn't give us a 32 gigabyte card. They only gave us an 8 gigabyte card, which is a little dumb or whatever. You know, I don't think it's 8 gigabytes. Maybe it was 8 gigabytes. I think it was 4. It was 4 or 8. I don't really care. That's not what I'm talking about. We have a complete system here without the means to actually play it directly in the box it's included in. It cannot be powered and therefore cannot be used without a cable. And not everyone that's going to buy a new 3DS is going to have the original 3DS. In fact, I'm sure some people held off because the 3D effect was a little wonky and you had to hold the thing at the right angle. And who cares? I mean, who wants to do that? You might as well just not care. And, you know, you have your iPhone, which has games on it already. Why bother buying this thing if the 3D isn't even that great? And that's all you care about, I guess. Well, the new 3DS will have the ability to actually track your face, and therefore can do the 3D effect more effectively by far. Hey, nice. And it has more buttons and more controls. It has a nipple mouse that they call the second control stick. It is literally a nipple mouse. It is also literally the second control stick. It's just kind of crammed above the buttons because they ran out of ideas of where the fuck to put it, I guess, and what to actually make it. So that's good. There's 2 more shoulder buttons, ZL and ZR, that's fine. And better life's better. And the system's slightly more powerful. Okay. Wait, so when's the new 3DS coming out? It's only been 3 years. Is this something they're like announcing way ahead of time? But, you know, it's going to be a big deal later on. They just want to give us a big heads up so everyone gets real hyped for it. You know, it's got a huge word of mouth already. They're trying to make up for the fact they didn't fucking advertise the Wii U and still aren't. No! They're releasing it very soon, 3 years after the original system. And also, due to the fact it's more powerful and has more buttons, it will have several games for it, as far as I'm aware. At least one already that's a fairly big name. Starts with Xeno. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, it has this character Shulk that's in Smash Brothers that everyone knows about. Yeah, not a big deal. Yeah, they're putting games out that people are going to want that you can't play without the new 3DS. So if you already shelled out money and have been shelling out money for the 3DS for a long time, good luck. Sorry, you had to buy another one. Another problem with this, Nintendo has this thing where they tie DLC to the hardware. Unless you do a bunch of annoying shit to change that. So, furthermore, instead of being able to say with every other console in the market, oh man, I had to get a new console, my console broke. Okay, bought new console, log in, I got all my DLC back because I bought it once and it's tied to my account. That makes sense, but password, and then therefore more than one person can't log into my account. It's protected. People aren't going to sit here and steal the game, and then 80 people aren't going to log into one account and just play the game. It's not going to happen. Cool. No, not in this case. That would make too much sense. Nah, way too much sense. Instead, you have to do a bunch of stupid shit just to get your DLC you just paid for onto the new console they just put out that you want to get if you want to play all the games they will put out. Now, you might say, but what about the DSi art? That did okay, and that had some games of its own and very different hardware. What's wrong with the new 3DS? I mean, other than the name, because I'm sure everyone would concede the name's stupid. I hope. But, you know, what's wrong with slightly different hardware and some exclusive games? Well, for one, we don't know how many exclusives there will be on the new 3DS yet. And even back when the DSi came out, I opposed that too, because that's dumb. It was still a little too soon in my book, but not as bad as 3 years to release a new, semi-new console 4 years later. And there was a lot of things that you got built into the new the DSi that you could still get on the original 3DS in some form or factor, and you know, it's not as bad as losing out on quite a few features, including heavily improved 3D and such. And I would be actually okay with that. I would be okay with the idea of having better 3D capabilities and the fact that it actually tracks your face, actually, updates which way the 3D is working based on where your head is. Much better. And, having more buttons, that's nice, even though the nipple mouse thing they put on is a little silly, but, and that's not the best. But hey, they don't include the AC adapter with it. That's not, good. Well, what's the problem, though? I run out of arguments. What have you got against this, Art? Do tell. Simple. We don't know for sure how many exclusives they'll put out. I just said it, and I'm going to say it again. How many would they put out? We don't know. This thing's considerably more powerful than the old system, as far as I know. But not that considerably more powerful. As far as I know, it's not more powerful than, say, a PlayStation Vita. And I'm not saying it should be, because that was actually part of the downfall of the Vita. It was too powerful and too risky to develop for, because it was too expensive to develop for. But this is still not good, and why? Okay, I gotta really come clean, don't I? Let's go ahead and try that. So, they are putting out a console that may or may not have a bunch of exclusives, not long, I mean very much not long after the previous console, with a whole bunch of updates. Well, some people are like, well, if they did make a reiteration of the console with new buttons, that would still be different, right? In fact, Nintendo themselves said, since there's these new buttons built into it, therefore, we have to go ahead and make some exclusive games for it that you can only play on it with all these extra buttons. Okay. No. No, and here's why. I'm actually going to go back to Sega again. Hi, Sega. How you doing? Oh, dying as a company? I'm sorry. Point is, let's talk about the Sega Genesis for a second, or their biggest, most successful console. That thing had a controller with 3 buttons, a start button, and a control pad. And the Super Nintendo had 4 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons, start and select, and the control pad. A lot more buttons. And yet people were porting games between both consoles, so what the fuck? How do you play the same game on both consoles when there's less buttons on the Genesis? They had workarounds, and they weren't the best, but it still worked. You could still play the games on the other console, it's just, at times, not insuperior. Except, Sega thought about this and were like, why don't we put out an extra controller with more buttons? So they put out the 6-button controller, and everything was hunky goddamn dory. If you wanted more buttons, you had that option. But you could still play every single game regardless of what fucking controller you had, as long as you had a controller. And the system came with one, so you're set. And, in fact, Nintendo had a huge opening here. In fact, they had a huge opening for a better name for the console. They had a huge chance here, and here's what they should have done. They should have called it the Pro 3DS. Now, let me actually say why. They should have made their hardware much more powerful, where there's actually exclusives that only work on it like this. And should they have not put all those buttons on it? Actually, no. Keep those buttons on it. Why? Because you could get these attachments for the regular 3DS. And not the 2DS, to be sure, but the 3DS and 3DS XL, last I checked, have attachments that add more shoulder buttons. At least I think they did. But they definitely added another control stick. So you could still play more or less the same games on a slightly wonky-looking console. But you had the option, like the Sega controller. You had an option, and that's fine. Except they make the hardware a lot different in the form of it's being stronger, and therefore there's games that just simply couldn't even run on the regular 3DS. And that's where they're shooting themselves in the foot. Exclusives for this console that is way too soon, and asks way too much of the buyer, to be perfectly honest with you, not a good idea. And they're already reeling from the poor decisions with the Wii U. All they had left, really, was the 3DS as far as a moneymaker, and now they're shooting that in the foot. Why? Why would you do that? It's a dumb idea. It's a dumb choice. And it's not even the dumbest fucking choice. We're going to get to that. It's going to get better. Here comes the real fun. And so now we actually take another step back in history in order to catch us up with what I'm going to actually be talking about. The big, newest, new thing that Nintendo has done wrong. Nintendo and YouTube, specifically Let's Players, they've been draconian towards them. Just flat out, no, you can't do this, and we're going to take all the ad revenue money, and you get nothing. And that's just, no one's like that. No one like that. Even Nintendo kind of realized, okay, this is not working. Everyone else is allowing this, and it's giving them great coverage. And lots of people are like, man, I saw PewDiePie play game. I saw Markiplier play game. I want game. I saw a guy play game that I like on internet. Play game now, want have. That works. It's proven to work, Hell, I believe a quote from PewDiePie is on the box of a game somewhere. I swear to God, that is a thing. I think it was GTA 5, in fact, which is the most expensive game of all time. and it's selling like crazy, but PewDiePie, or whoever it was, or whichever game it was, it's somewhere, PewDiePie's quote is on the game, and that's important. That's the funny thing. So, Nintendo thought about this, I guess, and they were like, well, okay, we'll make you guys a deal. Ooh, deals with Nintendo. Run, run, run far away. Run far away. Nintendo's trying to make a deal, and that never ends well. Don't make deals with Nintendo. Here it comes. Now, I mean, I've gone over everything, right? Can you really trust Nintendo at this point? Can you really? They make a lot of terrible decisions and backstab people, or at least fuck people over in some way, in more than one time in the history of the gaming industry. So why would you trust them with this? Okay, so what's the deal? What is the deal? Is it worth it? Okay. You can register a video with Nintendo, which they're still making all the money directly on, by the way. They're directly getting the money still. You know, it is a system of trusting them after you agree to a bunch of nonsense, which I'm going to discuss here. You can register either single videos or make your entire channel entirely Nintendo focused, which... Here's the difference. If you only register single videos, each video will get you 60% of what's left over after everything else that comes out of the ad revenue, which I'll discuss shortly. 60%. How bad? How bad could that be? It sounds okay, right? No. Most other people provide 90% of the ad revenue to their people who actually produce the content, because that you have to eat. You know, if you're making content, you have to eat. Hell, I'm trying to make content so I can fucking eat on the content I make, because I like to make videos, and therefore would like to do it as a job. Here I am making the video that is my job on the side. Hi. But if I want to make Nintendo videos, I get a huge cut down on what cut I should be getting, to be exact. Ha. So, let's talk about how little you really get. Let's assume a video makes you $100. I really wish that would happen to me, but let's just not worry about that right now. Let's talk about Nintendo. So, $100 on the video. Who gets what money? Well, Google owns YouTube. So, fair enough, they're hosting your video. They're hosting a lot of videos. They have to do a lot to host those videos, honestly. You know how much fucking shit goes on YouTube all the time? A lot. So, therefore, they get half the money off the ad revenue. And you might be like, directly half? That's crazy. Except they fucking own the website, and that's how you can make the video and post it, because you post it on their website. Now, if you want to post it on a different website, then that's all you. But if you're going to be getting ad revenue through Google, they're getting half, because they own the website, and that's half the work, and that's reasonable. And then, you know, some other companies sometimes will pull money out of it depending upon who you work with. Okay. But assuming only the half was removed to begin with, and nothing else, you're making $50 on the video that should make $100 for you. Or at least $90 under other people who would give you 90% of what's left. Except you don't actually make that much, because, like I said, it gets cut in half by default, at least. So, you sit there and you take the $50 and you take that and, you know, put in that little 60% number, and you come up with, oh my god, you're making so much less money now. Why? Because Nintendo thinks that making a little extra money from the money that you aren't making is good, except it hurts your bottom line and it doesn't do anything for theirs. They don't make enough money from the ad revenue to make this matter at all. But for, you know, small-time people who are doing just videos on YouTube who aren't big, giant corporations, that's how they're making money, or at least that's a big way they're making money. And when you take away a huge chunk of it like that, then you're just kind of fucked. And no one's going to want to do that. As far as I know, no one so far has expressed liking this idea. Oh yeah, the difference, you get 70% instead of 60% if your whole channel is devoted to Nintendo. Okay, so the figures suck. You're not going to get much money. What else could possibly be wrong with this deal? It is already terrible. No, it gets worse. Oh no. What else could they have done? Nintendo, you bad dog. Why would you do this? Okay, well, also they have to sit there and review your video for 3 fucking days. Minimum. Okay, let's just talk about this for 2 seconds. Most people who do this kind of video, these kinds of videos, have a timetable they're trying to stick to, especially if they do a newsy video that also involves the game footage that Nintendo would have copyright claim over. That they had to post that video the day of, or as soon as they possibly can, to be in it on the news. They want to be in on that situation to actually talk about it. Otherwise, it's who cares? It's old news. Who cares? And if your shit's locked down for 3 days before Nintendo's cool with it, then fuck you, deal with it. Fuck you and deal with it. That's all you got. Why? That's not good. Oh yeah, I was talking about the amount of money you make. Like I said, let me read the little thing here I don't have. Nintendo takes the money, all of it first, and then after they think your video is cool with them, then they'll send in US dollars money to you. I believe it was over PayPal. I don't exactly remember because this is shady as fuck. No one else does it like this. No one's like, we're going to hold on to the money, but we'll probably give you the money. Maybe. If you agree to our ridiculous contract. Which controls what you can actually do with the videos, as far as I can tell. So for all we know, Nintendo could go ahead and sit there and say, well, this is a bad review of our game. Like, they don't like the game. Let's just not allow them to make money on that. They can still have the video, but they won't be able to make money off of it because we do not like what they said about our game. They can do that. And you can't sit there and honestly critique Nintendo under their own rules, possibly. Now, will they do that? I don't know. I don't fucking trust them. They could do anything. They might explode for all I know. Like, literally the building will just explode, like, instantaneously for no reason. But you can't really tell because Nintendo is a fucking unpredictable, untrustworthy pile of shits. And I don't care what kind of games they make some fantastic games. Their hardware is interesting at times, but flawed, but not the worst thing ever. Other than the Virtual Boy, which was literally a prototype on the market. Why? Poor. Okay. Why would you trust Nintendo? There's no reason to trust them. No one should trust Nintendo. I don't trust Nintendo. I lost trust for them just from how much they stopped caring about their original customers long ago, and it's not getting much better now. And why? I just really cannot say much else about why would they do this. Nothing about the system's good. Everyone has a better option. And just to be honest, there's not that much Nintendo content, so making your channel around nothing but Nintendo content's hamstringing yourself further, because you only have so much you could possibly talk about. And I don't think anyone wants to do that. I don't even think, you know what? No, I don't even have to think. I have a good example of someone who is a big name that had to switch off of Nintendo so he could actually grow as a thing. The Angry Video Game Nerd. Anyone remember that guy? I mean, you know, who heard of that guy? Oh, originally called the Angry Nintendo Nerd, but then he changed his name partly due to legal reasons, but also so he could cover more of the Nintendo games. Yay! And therefore his popularity only grew. In fact, his content heavily improved, one could say, as time went on, since he had more things to work with. And that's awesome. But if he had been locked into Nintendo's nonsense, then not so awesome, because then he would only be able to cover Nintendo games, and even then, they probably still wouldn't care, because he would be making negative reviews, which means there's a possibility they would just not approve it. Because why they approve it? Well, why they would approve a negative review in the first place? Who cares? Because their contract pretty much says it's whatever the fuck they want. If they don't like your video, then that's too bad. If you say too many dangs and darns and fucks, then you're probably not going to be okay with that kid-friendly Nintendo, so your video is not going to make you money if it's Nintendo stuff and you said the word shoot. Oh no. Cunt. Oh no. Most likely. Now, has that happened yet? No. Can it happen? Definitely. Is that bad? Yes. My head aches. Nintendo. I have nothing else to really say. I've gotten to the point of having a headache, and I'm going to have to probably drink heavily after I'm done recording this bit. No one can really trust you, yet some people do, which is, you know, that's the real success here. Nintendo actually managing to get people to trust them still. You know, without making good decisions, mind you. Like, Microsoft has a good reason to have trust now. They're making a lot of good decisions, more or less. There's a few bad ones still. A few iffy things still. But compared to Nintendo, oh man, I would love an Xbox One compared to having a fucking Nintendo Wii at this point. Sorry, Nintendo Wii U. I forgot. The name's stupid. And I have completely run out of steam. I have a complete migraine. And I'm just sad and upset now, having, you know, spilled my guts about what I think of Nintendo. You know, it makes me wish I could travel back in time. Oh, wait, I know, let's talk about that. Or in fact, Colin's talking about that on his review on the blog that you should check out after the end of this video.